Okay, so we can start. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this event under the 28 for 28 webinar series on sustainable futures. My name is Raidan Sakaf. I am the economist at the UN office in the UAE. Today's webinar is about choices. It will discuss how the choices we make in our daily lives have profound implications, not only for our immediate environment, but also for the planet as a whole. We will start by discussing urban living, how cities are changing to become more sustainable and thereby influencing our living habits. The lead presentation today will be followed by commentaries on sustainable fashion, about foresight, and how we can improve the choices we make today and tomorrow. Finally, touching on a UAE case study of how we're trying to do this today. Before we start with our lead session, I'd like to invite you all to post your questions on the chat to inform our Q&A segment at the end of the webinar. With that, I now pass the floor to our colleague Bernhard Bard from UN Habitat. Bernhard, thank you for joining us today, and you have the floor.
Great, thank you very much. Checking that you can hear me and that you can see the presentation.
Yes, we can.
Very good. Good, thank you very much, colleagues. I'm very happy to present at this 28 for 28 event, and really nice to have this spot just before COP. So I will be presenting, of course, on the urban dimension of our future living, of course, looking at this very much through a climate change lens. Initially looking at how cities and sustainable urban development are connected to the whole climate change, cities and sustainable development nexus, present a little bit our take, introduce very briefly UN Habitat's now search initiative, which was initiated by the COP27 presidency. And I highlight that because it brings many of the dimensions together, but also because many of your agencies are partnering in this, and then very briefly a roundup in terms of what this means for COP28. Urbanization, obviously, a mega trend like climate change. You have a few figures here on the slide. In 1950, there were only 751 million urban dwellers. That has increased to 4.2 million urban dwellers now, 55% of the global population, and this is further growing from 50% to up to 70% in 2050. But it's not just the urban population that increases, but it's also the urban space that is increasing, and we look normally at this from the perspective of the land use, but it's also important to know that the building and construction that's happening in cities is phenomenal. So half of the buildings that will be standing by 2050 have not yet been built in 2023. Cities are drivers of climate change. Approximately 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions are related to cities, and that is up from 62% in just 2015. Those are IPCC numbers. And of course, we all know that overall global greenhouse gas emissions are increasing. So it's the totals and also the relative contribution of cities. And of course, to a very large extent, linked to energy demand. Cities are also very much impacted by climate change, and it is very much the urban poor that feel that the most. We have 70% of households that live in precarious tenure situations, and 50 million are forcibly evicted each year. And with climate change, this is only going to increase, increasing rural-urban migration, and of course has a further ramification for cities, and in particular the 1 billion urban dwellers that live in informal settlements. That number is likely to grow. Yeah, 3.3 to 3.6 billion people live in hotspots now to climate change, and of course many of those urban. On climate finance, and I think that obviously has a key implication for any future discussion on this topic. It's very important to know that of the almost 400 billion of climate finance that's been invested in urban areas. This represents only 10% of what's necessary for low carbon and resilient urban development. And it's in particularly important to note that of the adaptation finance, only 3 to 5% is specifically targeted to urban areas. And so in the future, the 4.5 to 5.4 trillion dollars per year that are needed for urban infrastructure, for sustainable low carbon infrastructure, that gap is tremendous. So cities, of course, in partnership with international institutions, national governments, and local stakeholders, need to come together, play a completely different role in terms of the way cities are developed and financed. Just zooming out for a moment, of course, also to link this back to the SDGs, only to highlight how interlinked this is in terms of countries not having local disaster risk reduction strategies, but there is some improvement in terms of the doubling of the numbers, but it is still far too few cities and far too few countries engaging there. We've talked about the slum dwellers, and maybe also linked to climate change is that air pollution and urban air pollution is a phenomenal problem, with 99% of the world's urban population at some point over the year breathes polluted air. Changing a little bit the tact here in terms of UN Habitat's climate change work. The key areas that we address are multi-level governance. We very much look at the urban dimension of the NDCs. Of course, I've mentioned slums now quite a few times. That translates for us in terms of the focus on equity, on vulnerable groups, slum dwellers, and others. We also look at technology and innovation in a very comprehensive manner. But it's also important to see that really the greenhouse gas emissions in cities can be reduced by almost 90% by 2050 with the existing technologies. And of course, there is some time to go, but even with what we know, what we have at the moment, a huge impact can be made. Talked about climate finance, and of course, local capacity is very much at the center of our work. Just zooming a little bit back to the first point on the last slide on the multi-level climate action and national priorities. Of course, there's a UN habitat bias. We think cities and local action is important, but do national governments agree with that? Currently, we have about 2/3 of the NDCs that have a clear urban content, but it's really only 24 of the NDCs that have a strong urban content, and that is determined by a set of 200 indicators that we have tested all of the NDCs against. So this is not a qualitative, but a rather quantitative analysis of the NDCs. One of our flagships is focusing on climate change and urban poor communities, the Resilient Settlements for the Urban Poor initiative, or RISE UP, which really focuses on making a direct impact at the local level, but also to mobilize the resources that are needed to really make a dent. So we're looking at bankable projects, an enabling environment, address that climate finance paradox that I've talked about, and coordinate and accelerate the efforts of key partners that can build urban resilience. This is our footprint, and these are our pipeline projects in terms of climate resilient settlements initiatives. These are some of the resources linking to a large extent to the RISE UP initiative, but also go well beyond this in terms of urban planning and design, in terms of sectoral interventions. In terms of the particular focus of today's session, important to highlight our various innovation dimensions. We organize on a 2-yearly basis the Innovate for Cities conference that addresses some of those key urban dimensions that I've mentioned, that you can see in this ring of the Innovate for Cities conference. We are developing this into the leading conference on research and innovation at the nexus of cities, policies, and climate change science. That brings together practitioners and researchers and policymakers, and this is directly linked or born out of the IPCC processes. The first conference of 2018 had already very strongly as a focus the special report of the IPCC on climate change and cities. At that time, there was, or when this first was conceived, there was still the assumption that that special report would be part of the 6th assessment cycle. It is part of the 7th assessment cycle, and it is the first report in the series of the IPCC documents. So an exciting opportunity to really connect the dots of our work with the IPCC. The scoping conference for this will be in the first quarter next year, and then hopefully between 2025 and 2026, that special report will be developed and finalized. But the Innovate for Cities conference that will contribute to this is scheduled for Montreal in September in 2024. Very briefly, this is just to give you a sense of the work of the Montreal office, which will lead our innovation work, hopefully to get online very early next year. We're looking at very strong support at the country and city level in terms of program development, in terms of evidence-based urban action, but linking this into a global platform that then includes the Innovator for Cities conference. Another, I think for us, exciting piece of work in the innovation space is the Climate Smart Cities Challenge. Only 4 cities at the moment, but something that we are expanding, which works very closely with a very broad and diverse range of cities to identify their specific climate action needs, to elaborate those fairly thoroughly, but then bring consortia of innovators together to address those, and obviously make those then also available to other cities. Maybe just in terms of futuring and kind of the hardcore work of UN Habitat in terms of urban planning, and how we really now at the not just the city but the landscape space strengthen the urban planning, the planning methodologies to include climate science and predictions, have a medium and a long term climate scenario underlined, and then use that linked with, of course, traditional planning methodologies to urban development initiatives that build climate resilient and net zero cities. The research initiative launched at the last COP, as I mentioned, is to some extent handed over by the COP27 presidency to UN Habitat. This is now anchored in a UN Habitat resolution to take that forward. And we see this as an integrator of our work, many of the components that I have showed earlier, linking very much to the multi-level governance dimension, ensuring that national governments or parties to the COP support this sustainable urban development and climate initiative, but also provide at the national level support to local actors and match partners with cities. So the mission is to act as a convening space to connect local, national, and global levels, to coordinate collective climate action for improved collaboration between sectoral initiatives, all with the objective to build more strategically on cities and sustainable urbanization as allies to help deliver the targets of the Paris Agreement. And may be visualized in this image, where we do have, to some extent, sectoral entry point, but that's exactly what they are, entry points, not standalone pillars for an integrated sustainable urban development approach. We do have these pillars because they help cities to find their right entry points, something that we have certainly learned in terms of our engagement, and of course linking the local to the global. We are currently finalizing the work packages with a very strong emphasis on the local and the national level, with the global just as a framework to facilitate the sector engagement and the multi-sector integration. In particular, at the local level, the tools are under development, but at the national level, we have conversations with national governments to set up within existing ministries focal points that provide the services and that support the enabling environment, and that can also function as the reporting entities to the global level. Very briefly to close, UN Habitat at the COP, of course, using this quote of the SG as to highlight the importance of cities. This particular COP, of course, is very much focused on the urban development and multi-level governance agenda, starting off with the Local Climate Action Summit as a part of the World Climate Action Summit. So this integration for us is a huge success. Grateful to the presidency and the partners that make that work, and UN Habitat certainly very proud to be associated with this. And there are now several hundred mayors confirmed to attend this. Of course, the 6th of December is the Multi-Level Action, Urbanization and Built Environment and Transport Day that we are helping to shape to accelerate urban action. And then the Urban Ministerial Meeting is for us the peak mechanism in the multi-level climate action pyramid, at the top of it, bringing ministers of urbanization, ministers of housing, but also ministers of environment and to some extent finance together to really reshape the mechanisms for the climate resilient net zero urban development that we need for a better urban future. And to close, we have a multi-level action and urbanization pavilion that hopefully acts as a space to bring partners together. And I leave it at that and apologize, I took a bit longer than planned.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Berhard, for that interesting presentation. And actually, it happened that yesterday, the synthesis reports of the National Development Contributions and Long-Term Strategies were published. And it highlights that we're still off track in a big way, although there is a less than a 2% improvement than what we had last year in terms of commitments. We need a lot more. And we need a lot more, especially from our cities, which are still 70% of emissions. And with the numbers of cities expected to double by 2050 to accommodate the growing urbanization rates and growing populations. This is at the center of climate action. So thank you for that. I would like now to pass on the floor to our colleague Sarah Asmar from the United Nations Environment Programme Regional Office. Sarah, you have the floor. You're on mute, Sarah.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for having me. I just need to share the presentation. Okay, I hope you guys can see my screen.
Yes, you can maximize it. Yep, success.
Okay, so I'm gonna make this very brief and quick. So I'm Sarah Asmar. I'm a sustainable lifestyle expert at the UNEP Regional Office for West Asia. Maybe we can start by a number, which is an increase in 4,550%, which is the increase in search interest on how to live a sustainable lifestyle. And we noticed this growing trend, and a lot of people usually question how they can actually lead a sustainable lifestyle. I won't dwell on this very quickly, but just to give you an idea of the current situation, we noticed, for example, in the fashion and textile industry, that we use more than 215 trillion liters of water every year. We emit 3.3 billion megatons of greenhouse gases, and that there's an annual material loss of 100 billion due to underutilization of clothes. There's also numbers that pertain to food and food waste, which is, for example, knowing that around 17% of total global food production is wasted. And finally, plastics, when we know that every minute the equivalent of one garbage truck of plastic is dumped in the ocean. At UNEP West Asia, to focus on these two topics, which are sustainable fashion and food waste, we have developed the Sustainable Fashion Academy in West Asia. And we've launched several different activities to really inspire people on what actions can be taken, because at the end of the day, even every small action has a great impact. In addition to that, there was a Recipe of Change campaign that was launched already. Now that we're in our third year, that focuses on food waste, and notably with Chef Leila Fathallah. Our latest initiative was at Sustainable Ramadan in 2023, where we managed to reduce food waste by an average of between 60 to 65% in 3 hotels in 3 Hilton hotels in Dubai, Qatar, and Riyadh. Finally, I want to take the most of the time to focus on that, the actions that we can take to lead a more sustainable lifestyle. We know that every small impact or every small action has an impact, and we need to remember that each individual has an equal responsibility to greening the environment. And this can be done in terms of sustainable fashion by simply wearing my clothes more often, being mindful of how I dispose my clothes. Like, you can always give them to a person in need or an NGO, or recycle them. Look into secondhand purchasing and thrift shopping, because this specifically emphasizes the idea of a circular economy, thus making sure that the clothes lifespan is extended. Of course, we focus also on washing and handling clothes with care to ensure that they last us a longer time. Instead of simply throwing out our garments, we can just mend any torn out fabric. And instead of shopping impulsively, we should set an intention and a list of to know and buy exactly what we need, especially in the month of November. We need to be reminded that it's not important to simply shop because everything is on sale, but shop for exactly what we need. And finally, we need to educate ourselves on greenwashing and select sustainable brands. At the moment, 40% of clothes that are purchased are never used. Therefore, every action can actually make an impact. I hope it was interesting and that I was able to convey the message and to understand, most importantly, that we do have responsibility as a consumer to consume properly, to consume less, and to consume in an eco-friendly manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was quite quick, but I suppose the message is that we tend to consume too much. And with growing incomes, with this type of lifestyles, we find ourselves even using more and more of the limited resources that this planet has. A story about me is actually I tried to calculate my carbon footprint and see how much do I cost this planet. And it's quite interesting to see how the different patterns and changes in lifestyles can actually have quite a profound impact. I promised myself to fly less. Perhaps now we can move a little bit to the future. I'd like to invite our colleague Iriana Lianki from the UN Futures Lab Community of Practice to take the floor. Iriana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Raiden. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to participate in this very, very interesting discussion. Actually, as you said, I'm a futures literacy and foresight specialist, and I'm working at UNESCO's social and human sciences sector. UNESCO is a co-lead of UN Futures Lab Network. But I'm specifically working for the management of social transformations and foresight program. So in our program, we strive to tackle inequalities and support the building of inclusive and resilient societies through a transdisciplinary approach, and obviously through the adoption of futures lenses and undertaking futures literacy and foresight futures work. In our work stream, in our futures literacy and foresight work stream, we regularly work with regions, cities, and communities on the ground to help them explore futures, to rethink their future and envision diverse, inclusive, and sustainable future states in different contexts. UNESCO, for more than a decade now, has been championing a capability-based approach to futures with its futures literacy and foresight program. This approach allows us to become better at preparation and planning, and more agile, inventful, and resilient, we would say, in the face of constant change and various surprises, various unknowns. And while it's a shared principle among future practitioners and researchers that we cannot predict the future, we could certainly prepare for its potentialities. We can try influencing it, and perhaps more importantly, we can develop capabilities not to feel overwhelmed or paralyzed by uncertainty and complexity, and rather treat them as resources instead of threats to capture novelty and identify new opportunities. Urban planning, spatial planning, and obviously futures work share common ground, as essentially urban planning, or speaking about the future of cities and sustainable cities, is about future challenges, future needs, and most importantly, it's about future people. There is this widely held notion that futures work and foresight or anticipatory governance are more about preemptive action and contingency planning to anticipate and be ready for future challenges and threats. And certainly, futures research and applied foresight can help us scan, identify, analyze megatrends, drivers of change, trend signals to inform our planning and strategy about future cities' needs and challenges. Or we can even stress test, future-proof our plans against diverse future scenarios to assess resilience, endurance, impact. But we should not forget that the future is not factual and the future does not exist. What it does exist is our ideas, our images, hopes and fears about future potentialities. And when we refer to future cities, we draw on personal and collective, symbolic, relational, spatial imaginaries. So, as I was saying before, futures work is not only about preemptive action, contingency planning, or optimization. It's also about expanding our perception. It's about exploring diverse future images, ideas, plans, to identify new opportunities, to identify preferred future states. And future work and applied foresight are also about fostering personal and collective agency and ownership to envision better futures and draw inspiration and motivation to see and do things differently today in the present. When it comes also to future cities, and we would say futures in general, every vision, every statement, every plan or goal, we should remind ourselves that it bears a specific framing, and also a set of actions for its realization and several consequences, good or bad. So along with our visions and our plans comes our responsibility towards our current fellow citizens and future citizens, if we take an intergenerational equity perspective that UNESCO, along with other agencies, UN agencies works a lot on this topic, to speculate and take into account the needs and interests of future people. Perhaps we could say that this endeavor is a bit paradoxical. How could we be sure of someone's needs and interest without knowing them, or without knowing how the future will be? As we said, the future cannot be predicted. However, this lack of knowledge should not justify, obviously, inertia or inaction, especially in the phases of climate crisis. For UNESCO and for us, it's more of a call and a reminder to make choices today that not bind our descendants, in other words, not to colonize their future. And always, it's a reminder to make explicit our intentions that underlie our plans and visions. Before perhaps I conclude this commentary, I could briefly refer to two projects, initiatives relevant to future of regions and cities' futures that UNESCO undertook over the last 2 years. The first one was a long-term project with the European Knowledge and Innovation Community for Climate of the European Institute of Innovation, during which we co-designed and implemented futures leaders and foresight interventions in 2 regions in Europe in the context of just transition. The region of Rybnik in Poland and the city of Kozani in Western Macedonia and Greece, where local citizens in both regions had the opportunity to engage in future-oriented action learning, collective intelligence processes to reimagine the future of their regions and chart new personal and collective paths, identifying also personal and collective opportunities for social and organizational innovation, and elaborate policy recommendations. The process in both cases proved to be extremely valuable for constructive public consultation and introduction of a systems innovation approach in this region, especially during the very, very challenging and demanding context of just transition. The second activity we actually ran with good colleagues from UN Habitat, Doug Regan, and from UNEP, Sandor Friedrich and Alexander Kaldas, with the collaboration of the Middlesex University in London, was a participatory futures workshop for young people coming from UN Habitat's youth network to envision sustainable cities in the future. In this initiative, we leverage the potential of theater and experiential futures to allow for full immersion into futures speculation and exploration. So the young participants enacted virtual tours of their preferred cities 20 years from now, simulating and get a real taste of the everyday futures experience. So this process allowed to overcome the abstract futures thinking and develop what we call at UNESCO temporal empathy with our past, present, and future selves, but also with past, present, and future future fellow citizens. The results from the satisfaction survey among the young participants were extremely positive and encouraging, and we received many requests for running additional workshops and trainings. It was a pilot action in the context of the HLCP Foresight Network, and we hope that we will have the opportunity to continue this work and join forces again, and perhaps in the context of the UN Strategic Foresight Community of Practice, have similar activities in the future. And I guess I should stop here. So over to you, Raiden. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you very, very much for that rich presentation. And you raised a lot of very profound questions, I might add. Philosophical, maybe, perhaps. And it also relates to the issue of definitions, which I would like to drill you a little bit more on that, and then when we have the Q&A, in terms of how do we define what is sustainable for us, what's sustainable as we envision it, but also how do others envision the same thing. There was one story about how one person was yelling to the other person on the other side of the river, asking, how do I get to the other side of the river? But then again, they were asking the question, you're already on the other side of the rivers. It's a question about perspectives and how do we understand more about the perspective of future generations. I'd like now to give the floor to our colleague, Dr. Pablo Lopez from the Municipality of Ras Al Khaimah. Dr. Pablo, you have the floor.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Raiden, for the invitation, and good afternoon to you all. I've just prepared a brief presentation regarding the Mansili Energy Services, which is the one that I would like to talk to you today. The service is a part of an initiative that we have got here in Ras Al Khaimah municipality, and the initiative is part of the overall wider strategy that that we have. We are in one of the Emirates in the United Arab Emirates, and our strategy is to move from, let's say, the old Ras Al Khaimah that you can see kind of at the bottom left towards a new, more modern Ras Al Khaimah. And we are trying to move forward with the help of these different programs, these different people rowing all of them in the same direction. What we are trying to do is in our particular responsibility, in my particular responsibility area, is to discuss about the building retrofits and the energy management, which are two of the programs that are available in the boat as part of the strategy. So in order to move forward, what we have come up is with targeted initiatives for residential sector. And the residential sector is important because it is around 30% of the total electricity consumption of the Emirate. We have a lot of industry, so that is the majority of it. But for the residential, it's around 30%, and particularly targeting the local residential sector, meaning the Emirati households, which are around 23% of the overall consumption. And what we have done is we have created the Mansili Energy Advice Service. This Mansili Energy Advice Service is a collaboration. We have just announced it a few months back between the municipality, which is the entity in charge of the strategy that I have just briefly mentioned to you now, and the local utility, which is Etihad Water and Electricity, or Etihad WE for short. The service was available before for all local homeowners in this case, local as in residents in Ras Al Khaimah, that they own a house, and it includes the advice from a municipality expert that will go to the house. Maybe it can be done as well with a video call nowadays that this is also available, and this can be done with the expert going around and providing like a customized solution for the houses of the residents here in the Emirate. The idea is to offer them possibilities to save on electricity and water, to give them solutions to improve indoor air quality and comfort, and to recommendations on how they can make their houses smarter and more modern. We have found that this has got quite a lot of appeal in the pilots that we have done in the past, and we are just trying to give the residents not only a list of the things that they could do, but just go one step beyond and actually give them potential suppliers and potential companies that they can actually use to go and to actually implement the recommendations. Because if you just kind of leave them on a report, which is part of the service, then they will not be, or there might not be potentially implemented. So the idea is to give them and to facilitate it as much as possible, while remaining vendor neutral as well. That is another balance that we need to do, to give them this possibility of saying, like, maybe the air conditioning that you have got in your house, it is quite old. How about if you replace it with a more efficient one? Your water faucets are flowing too much. Maybe you can put this water aerator. You can improve the maintenance, and these customized recommendations are presented in this report. The extra novelty that I think that we have come up with in Ras Al Khaimah municipality is to partner with the local utility, the Etihad Water and Electricity, and we have partnered with them so that whenever a local Emirati homeowner avails the service, from the moment that they become that we do the home audit for them, they take a baseline of the previous 12 months. And that is the baseline from where, if they save in the next 12 months, then they will receive an incentive of 1 dirham for every dirham that they save. This has got benefits, because obviously there are monetary benefits for the for the local homeowner, the local Emirati homeowner, because whatever they save, they will get doubled, okay, up to within a limit of 50% of the total electricity bill that they have. But it is also important because there will be no greenhouse gas effect of the kilowatt hours that they will be saved, and the local utility rates are subsidized for the utility rates are subsidized for local residents, for Emiratis, and therefore the utility increases some of their cost, because obviously they need to give 1 dirham for every dirham that they haven't saved, but avoid paying the subsidy. And therefore, there is a win-win-win situation for everyone. There is a win situation for the municipality, that is that there is a contribution to the targets of the energy strategy. There's a contribution to the environment. There's a contribution for the pocket of the local residents, and there is a contribution as well for the environment, for the utility company, that they don't have to provide and to subsidize that consumption of electricity. So this is in a nutshell the Mansili Energy Advice Service. We have launched it recently. We are in the first stages of having a pilot to roll it out. We have made it publicly available, and hopefully in future seminars we'll be able to present and to discuss some of the results that we are finding. Thank you very much for the time, and back to you, Raiden.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation, Dr. Pablo. When I heard about this idea and how it was envisioned, I was actually quite mesmerized in a sense. I think it's not only ahead of its time, but having the right kind of incentives so that we're able to get people to change their behaviors and capital and reduce their environmental footprint in urban settings. So thank you very much for that.
No problem. Thank you.
I don't see any questions in the Q&A segment, so maybe perhaps we can put a couple of questions of my own and for our discussion. One key element that keeps bugging me when it comes to the issue of urbanization is that urbanization is likely to continue one of the largest sources of emissions going forward. And the innovations that we have introduced in terms of increasing density and better urban planning, greening urban spaces for cooling purposes, haven't been yielding the results that they are. A lot of the contractors and the private sector voices say a lot is riding on technologies. So maybe we can have a bit of discussion about technology in terms of how will it help us generate the results that we hope to achieve in terms of efficiencies, or it's more of a behavioral issues like Dr. Pablo has mentioned. Maybe we can reflect on this issue in the same order of the panel, starting with Bernhard, our expert.
Yeah, happy to start this off. I mentioned in my presentation that we have the technologies for 90% of the greenhouse gas emissions already in place. Obviously, with that, I certainly do not want to say that this needs to be a technology-driven approach only, and an innovation approach, of course, includes systems changes that also incentivize behavior change. So I think, yes, the technology dimension is important, but I would certainly promote a very integrated approach that is very strong on policy, that is very strong on not only empowering cities, but also incentivizing and to some extent enforcing that cities contribute to the targets of the Paris Agreement. That is partially technology, but of course that is also just different systems. You mentioned densification, but of course that's also which has huge implications in terms of building and construction, but of course also huge implications for mobility, which is a huge contributor, and cities and urban mobilities contribute. 40% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions are in buildings. I've mentioned that 50% of the buildings that we will have in 2050 have not yet been built. Of course, we do need different types of building materials. We do need to have different building processes, but we also need to go away from incentivizing so-called green buildings that are premium buildings and are 500 square meters big. So there needs to be that behavior change that comes with it. We have little time. I could go on and on in terms of different sectors, but yeah, back to you, Raidan, and colleagues.
Maybe I can probe you on that point specifically in terms of the the real estate sector and the construction sector, and incentivizing green buildings which are more expensive, or maybe penalizing the other ones. And there is a big question mark on the right to housing, especially looking at the most of the population growth is expected in the global south. Also, the same thing for urbanization. If you take one country like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is expected to double in terms of population, there needs to be new cities, and those cities are, chances are, will take place replacing biodiversity or affecting biodiversity. So what is the solution there?
Well, I think the biodiversity conversation, of course, I haven't really touched very much upon, but I think it's really great to see how urban planning and land use are so strongly integrated into the global biodiversity framework. Certainly be great to see equally strong and clear languages in the climate change agreements. And ultimately, there are processes, there are planning frameworks that, of course, reduce the sprawl on the one hand, and in a way can actually contribute to preserving land. But there's also, of course, a lot of innovation in terms of increasing biodiversity, in terms of increasing green public space, in cities. So again, that comes down to planning, and there are great examples already in place and that are ready for replication.
Well, thank you very much. Maybe we can hear from the other colleagues.
Maybe from my side, I've always been a little bit more of a technology person. I think that some of the solutions are there, and definitely we are still using or accessing some of the initial solutions available, because we are just doing them based on the return of investment at the moment. A lot of people is still kind of saying, like, we will do this replacement, we will change these energy consuming equipments because of they make sense, no, to from an economical point of view. Maybe the environmental is an associated extra benefit, but at the same time there is an investment in many of these things that have to be done. But the behaviorals are even simpler to do, no, because it's just about education and telling people what you have to do, and maybe with just one finger you can set your thermostat at a higher set point to achieve a lower energy consumption, no. So this is something that has to be part, is a combined solution at the end of the day. And then once we progress with those basic elements, eventually we can move forward and we can go a little bit higher up the chain to reach that 90% of the coverage of the greenhouse gas emissions that Berhan was referring to, no?
Thank you, Pablo. We'll hear maybe from Ariana.
Yeah, so I was thinking your question from a futurist perspective, and like in our field, we have a lot of I would dare to say even banal images of technological utopias or technological dystopias. Images where, like all of our problems will be solved by technology, or images of collapse because of technology. At the same time, we should also think that behavioral patterns are also evolving, along with norms and ethics of society, maybe perhaps, like at a slower pace. So I guess that technology is one part that can provide opportunities and challenges to our societies. But we should also, like as the other speakers already mentioned, to focus on behavioral change and try also to find opportunities for social innovation, organizational innovation, systems innovation, and obviously as well, not relying exclusively or all our hopes and fears on technological innovation.
Thank you, Ariana. Maybe you can close with Sarah.
Yes, so in fashion, it's a little bit different, but there's also a big focus on technology, but also on biology. So there's, for example, when it comes to colorants, there's a lot of focus and studies on different ways of microorganisms developing natural colorants and replacing chemicals. There's also a lot of work on fibers being adaptable, changing sizes, for example, specifically in toddlers' clothing, which we know is something that changes very quickly because kids grow out of their clothes very fast. So there are a lot of technologies in that array with garments actually staying with a child from the age of 4 and up to the age of 10. Other ways of innovation is more on the chemical side of the products that are used, and on alternatives, especially in terms of having outfits that last longer. So basically that's that in terms of sustainable fashion. The biggest focus remains on behavioral change, remains on consumer responsibility, which we've noticed has gained more focus recently, making it easier for each individual to understand that they also have responsibility to also affect, if you want, the supply, because at the end of the day, it's an economical transaction.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for that. I
Thank
think
you.
it puts us into a soft landing for this webinar, that technology will help make things better, but it will not save you. It's your behavior, our collective behavior. Thank you all very much for being with us today in this webinar. We look forward to connecting with you next week in our next webinar, discussing the issue of displacement. Next week's webinar will be the last thematic webinar discussing a specific topic, and we will conclude this session on the 29th of November, discussing reflections of 1 year since COP27. Thank you all for being with us, and see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.